Hello.
Hi.
Recording in progress.
Oops. Sorry about that. So welcome everyone to the Easton School Committee Naming Subcommittee meeting. In keeping with an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations, this meeting will be conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by the board members will be remote, and remote attendance shall count towards quorum. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded on ECAT. Okay, so item 1 is discussion and possible vote for a naming subcommittee chair. Anyone?
So
Michelle, I'm not sure, excuse me, I'm a little hoarse. I'm not sure it makes sense for one of the other 2 members, that would be Nancy and me, to be chair for this reason. The policy says that things are submitted to the chair of the school committee first, which is what your current role is. So it's.
But if I wasn't on this committee,
If you weren't on the committee, then whoever was chair would have to take that extra step of trying. I mean, you would still be getting whatever submissions were involved in terms of the current policy.
yeah,
And so there would be that, sort of, then you would have to contact one of us, whoever that. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. That I just was reading the information that Lynn so kindly sent to us. Of course, I looked at it months ago, but it was really great to have that refresher and not have to search my house for the documents. But that was something that kind of jumped out at me.
And I was also thinking that if there's just 3 of us, we're trying to get a group, like the one that we had before, the naming committee thing. I don't know that we need a chair. I'm going to be in agreement because, I mean, if you weren't here, then maybe, I might say, but like Jackie and I are on policy subcommittee. We just, the 2 of us,
Yeah, but you're co-chairs. You and
Oh,
Jackie.
is that what we are? Okay, I didn't know that.
We
I
could
didn't
be
know
tri-chairs. You know how they have tri-captains at OA
There you
now
go.
for the sports? We could be tri-chairs.
you're a chair,
Okay.
you're a chair,
All
you're a chair, everyone's a chair.
Thank you, Oprah. Anyway. Well, that's the thought. I mean, Michelle, it kind of makes sense for you to host the meeting just because you're having to go through the remote meeting sort of, presentation at the beginning of every meeting anyway. And then, Nancy has a point. We're just having a discussion, right? I mean, we might accidentally interrupt each other here and there, but
If I wasn't the chair, someone else could do the intro.
well, we could all just interrupt each other. That so I like Nancy's idea of just not necessarily having to have a designated chair. I don't think there's any kind of regulation around that, certainly for subcommittees.
And I also think once we have a committee, a naming committee in place of whether it's faculty, townspeople, elected officials, whatever it happens to be, then we would need a chairperson.
Yes, I do agree with that. I did want to, I think I have shared a little bit with Michelle, just, I had contacted one of the members of the Olive Ames High School naming campaign.
I think you had emailed us about that, Carol.
Right, and it was very helpful because actually I spoke to 2 different people, but they both said that having the second committee, that so-called cabinet, was not helpful at all. In fact, it kind of just slowed down the process. it was well-intentioned, but for a number of reasons, it turned out not to be a good idea. The other thing is that since the school committee is the committee that has to approve any naming, both the individual and the amount and so on, it probably doesn't make sense to have a large committee that's composed of various representatives because it's unclear what their exact role would be. I mean, I understand that they could be part of the process of approving an individual, but I think the school committee would still be, as part of the policy and whatever is set up in terms of the funding, that would already be established. Presumably, we would make a recommendation to the full school committee that the full school committee would vote on, that kind of detail. So I'm not sure it makes sense to have quite as large a subcommittee. And actually, the people I spoke with said that really it was just a few people that did 90% as usual of the work, and everyone else was just kind of on there as kind of as a technical representative of a particular group. So I don't think it's a bad idea to have some additional members, but I think ultimately because of our current policies, since the school committee is responsible for this area, essentially, it may not make a lot of sense to create a huge committee and certainly not to create a second like cabinet the way that happened before. Just my ideas.
I want to make sure I understand. So they were saying a steering committee per se was okay, but not to have the second cabinet.
Right. The cabinet, the thought behind the cabinet was that they would tap members of the community that they felt would essentially promote the campaign.
Yeah.
And would also potentially be interested themselves in contributing to the campaign. And in fact, a couple of those individuals did. But, basically she said those people became cabinet members for the most part in name only and didn't end up being able to promote the process or, really add much to it. And certainly I only know of one individual, maybe a couple that ended up doing contributions themselves. That they probably would have done anyway. In other words, the position of cabinet member was not really the key.
Mm-hmm. So what?
Although, it's interesting because when you look at the cabinet members, it's actually I may be actually reversing. Yeah, I think I'm reversing the names.
Committee that wasn't.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's the steering committee that was not. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to misspeak there. Because the cabinet is obviously not, those have the two school committee members on it.
Yeah.
So, and the principal of the high school, of course, that made sense because it was the campaign for All Williams High School, and a couple of other people that were really quite involved with the high school. So you're right. It's the steering committee. I think that they brought some ideas to the committee and so on, but my impression was not that they ended up really being in a terribly useful role.
Okay. So are we looking to form a cabinet? Is that what we want to call it?
Well, we don't have to call it a cabinet. I think we can just continue to call it, if it's a school committee subcommittee, it could still be the naming subcommittee that we just simply add members to.
Yeah.
As long as there are members of the school committee on it, it's, a school committee subcommittee, as long as there's more than one member and it's not a superintendent subcommittee. Yeah. I don't know. What do the two of you think? I don't want to be coming in here like saying, oh, this is what I think because I happen to talk to two people, but.
No, I'm glad that you did that background and research. I agree. I think sometimes when you get a whole bunch of people, you get too many chefs in the kitchen. We can still reach out to people for fun. Well, can you explain to me this, Caroline? I'm trying to.
Well, we would
info for us when I was here. who came up with the prices? I'm just trying to understand the big picture.
Well, that was actually, the prices were established through the help of a consultant. And here's the issue with that. The consultant was very expensive. At the time that this whole process started for the campaign for Olive Ames High School, the thought was that, you know, the consultant would give them the prices and that people would be sort of rushing forward to take advantage of these opportunities. As it turned out, the consultant probably used up half of the money that ended up being raised. I mean, it wasn't, you know,
Right.
so that's another thing we have to talk about. You know, is there a way to get information about, you know, what a given space might draw in terms of a donation without paying? I think the consultant was much more than 10,000. I mean, it was like thousands and thousands of dollars.
Right.
And I think that's in part because you have these very elite entities that hire consultants, like hospitals and universities. And of course, you know, these are very high priced professionals. But, you know, a small school, relatively small school district like Easton really isn't in that league. So I'm not sure that it makes sense for us to get a real professional to establish, you know, prices, and if we can get some of that information on our own. I mean, we may end up maybe having a consultation with someone that would be a small price. I don't know. But my sense from the people I spoke with, and of course they didn't represent necessarily the whole committee when they spoke to me, this was their impressions, but that the consultant ended up costing a whole lot, like a huge chunk of the funds that were actually raised.
Right. Yeah, I can't, if there's a way to do it without paying somebody,
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, that's money that can go to students or whatever, and not somebody's yacht.
I mean, possibly other school districts have had consultants or have established, you know, suggested donations or whatever you would call it, and would be happy to share that with us. I don't know. I mean, we could make some calls here and there and see if that's the case. I know that our superintendent has her own group of superintendents that she meets with regularly. Maybe she'd be willing to, you know, ask if any of them are doing naming campaigns, and if so, or are at least providing naming opportunities in their districts, and if so, how they arrived at the various suggested donations. You know, that's a possibility. That's and also, I mean, we do have Mass Association of School Committees. I'm not sure if we could put out a, you know, a question for members of our own professional organization to see if any of the districts that are members are, which is most districts in Massachusetts, are engaged in, you know, a process like this.
I'm sorry, things come on my phone and it rings on the computer.
But I wanted to talk to you guys about something else. You know, the policy that Lynn so helpfully sent to us, I was reminded that there's sort of two categories that we ended up with. And one was based on what was called extraordinary service or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And the others were larger spaces with designated donation amounts. I'm not sure that it makes sense for us to have two different, for this particular opportunity, we'll call it, for people. I'm not sure it makes sense to have those two categories, because first of all, I mean, quite frankly, something like outstanding service is in the eyes of the beholder. You know, how do we create criteria for someone who may have, you know, watered the flowers for 3 months in front of a school compared to someone who already made huge financial donations to the school, or who I don't know, won the Nobel Prize. But I just think that it's really difficult to have that dichotomy. You know, large spaces, we're going to have designated amounts. Small spaces could be for an amount of a donation, or could be for outstanding service. Or I think there was even another category that was, essentially it was about the worthiness of the individual. But as I think we've learned ourselves, that's really impossible to quantify.
Mhm. It becomes a
Sorry,
very.
I'm talking too much.
No, I agree. And I think that we ran into trying to quantify it, and it becomes a subjective.
Right.
It's subjective. It's not a measurable. I agree
It's
with that.
also it's a potential slippery slope. You start with one person who made some like phenomenal contribution, and then maybe the next person made a really nice contribution that was quite modest, but then the advocates for that second person are going to be just as passionate about wanting to have a space named after the person that they have found reason to admire, and I'm sure good reason. But I just don't think, I think that just makes it too complicated.
Okay.
But I mean, you don't have to agree. We all have to.
Yeah, I do agree with you.
Giving you my ideas.
I
Yeah.
think that particular issue was the crux of, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
That made it really tough. Where if we just do monetary across the board.
Right.
then
That
it
was
would-
one of the things
it is.
that, right. That was one of the things that both people had said to me, is that the campaign for Oliver Ames High School was really supposed to be just about the money
Mhm.
and the designated donations. And it was never supposed to be kind of trying to decide how worthy an individual was, or whether that person was more worthy than others who might be brought forward. And that's something that, I think none of us, and I certainly blame myself for not having done the research at that time. I don't think we were really aware, but both of them said this was all about, the money that we wanted to raise for the high school at the time. So anyway, just some thoughts. What do you think, Nancy? You have the perspective of, being in the building as a classroom teacher for
Yeah.
many, many years, one of the buildings, and
Right. No, and I agree that definitely, there's a million people. You could say, oh, we need to name this room for so-and-so. They, they did this, they did that. But, I think even looking at the list and stuff, but I mean, like even a classroom, if we had a range,
Mhm.
so any amount would be helpful, although you don't want to say, okay, we're going to give this to you for $100. It's got to, you've got to have some, a low and a high maybe, or something like that.
I'm not even sure that would work unless you just made it on like square footage,
Yeah, that's true.
And if you,
Well, yeah. What did we end up doing? Was it 150,000 from the music people for the Dalrymple Auditorium? Was that, did that end up
125, 125
Was it 125 or 150?
is 125. We
Okay.
tried for 150.
All right, I couldn't
And
remember.
the actual price was actually,
250, 250 is
250,
what they
right,
were
250,
asking.
right.
Now, the new gym did, that went at 150, but I know they got money. I think WB Mason had made a huge donation to that, was my understanding. And
What,
then the
what are you
classroom,
talking, wait, Nancy, wait a minute, what are you talking about? The new,
the Nixon gym.
oh, Nixon gym, right, oh, right, okay, you're right. Yeah, that was 150.
Yeah, and then the classrooms, I know, I feel like we've had different amounts for classrooms, like,
We have, but
there's
the original
5,000, and then the middle school gym, I don't even know what we ended up with that. That was kind of.
We ended up with a very low amount because
Yeah.
the people that originally promoted it kind of ended up reneging.
losing the ball on that one.
Well, kind of, Renee, yeah, we messed that one up, but I mean, honestly, it was because we trusted.
But that was the first one we had at the middle school. Other
Just the
than
op-
now that the middle school auditorium is actually supposed to be the Gilbert C. Mann Auditorium, although I don't think that ever went back up once the reconstruction happened. And, you know, I think his
Well, you're
picture
right.
might still be up there. I know, what a surprise. And that's what I'm saying. There's like, even with the 3 schools right now going to Blanche Ames School, at Morrow Hall, you have the Colleen Green Garden. At Century School, there might be something else. At Parkview, there might be, and I don't know if any of that is going to be moved over to the new school or not. And it's just like, we can't forget about what happened in the past, because people did, you know, put time, effort, money into all of that. Do you know what I mean?
No, you're exactly right. But if you look at the policy, which I think was very helpful, there's no
Yes,
guarantee
I
of
did.
a time period, and it's never in perpetuity. It's never in
Right.
perpetuity. And in
Right.
fact, that happens
True.
to be true, even if things like stadiums, people pay
Right.
the price, but it's for 5 years and they can renew it,
Right,
or they can choose not to continue, you know, with that
True.
name. But
right.
the other thing is the classrooms. Interesting enough, you're exactly right. The last classroom I think that we actually approved was 5,000, but the classroom, the designated amount was 8,500.
Right.
So that again, we just, you know, we hadn't had that old information. And even though I was on the school committee at the time, I was not involved with the actual naming committee. So I really had not, you know, other than just doing all the approvals that the school committee had to do, I wasn't involved in the, you know, the various discussions about how to proceed. So I think that we need to generally be pretty firm. I like your idea of a range, but I think the range should be based on sort of the prominence of the space. You know, for even a classroom,
Well,
you could have.
Right. So, I mean, if you're looking at this list, like the art area would be much more than, you know, just a regular classroom, you know,
Right.
or the guy, whatever. But also now we're looking at all 4 schools, like if anybody wanted to do something in all 4 schools. So, I mean, maybe we do keep it at one certain price for each, not one certain price for each space, but by how big the space is. Yes, but like you were saying, Caroline.
Well, and you could you could have a little bit of a, you know, a smaller group that was just not just based on size, but also kind of the significance. So something like an auditorium or a gymnasium that many members of the public will be visiting, and you know, it's not just a classroom where you're going to have those kids that year and that teacher that year or each year, but you know, one of the larger spaces, the significance is probably as important as the square footage. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But certainly for something like classrooms or ordinary spaces, I think it does make sense to make it.
Places visited by townspeople and other is, you know.
The community spaces, which would be the gym and the auditorium, that type of thing. So, but I do think we probably can talk about reaching out to a small group of people to supplement the committee who might have something to offer in terms of maybe either experience or fundraising experience or
So if I'm hearing you guys right, I'm coming up with 4 buckets. Committee, who's on the committee, the process, we're definitely doing all 4 schools and spaces. And with that, like the amounts.
All right, Michelle, say that one more time. So I get in the notes.
Maybe it's really 3 buckets. So I'm hearing that we need the process of a committee is one thing we need to tackle. What that process beginning to end from submission to approval, just without the dollar amounts, just what that process is,
Yep,
needs to be dealt with. I think we all agreed 4 schools, all 4 schools. So what are the amounts? And those are some of those conversations where the community spaces would be more and whatnot, but those type of topics. So there's kind of 3 major areas, committee.
well, all 4 schools that might go with the formation of the committee.
Well, that was.
It would just be like a known, right? Is that what you're saying?
For the first one, I said committee would be the formation of it, who's gonna be.
Right, so but all 4 schools would actually be just understood by,
Yeah, so originally I'd written it down, that's how I had 4 things on them, but then I think we
Okay.
agreed it was all 4 schools. So it was
All
like
right.
committees, process, and amounts.
and I don't know about you guys, but I have no clue about how much to charge or what's the going rate. And I do agree that when they did, and wonderful for them for even putting this together, but so long ago. What was it, 2006, 2007, in that area. And I just think that we have to be realistic. If we want to get some money for our schools and some donations, just like we did up at the field or whatever, we need to have realistic prices for our schools, right?
Yep. So do we agree that those are the 3 major buckets, a committee, a process, and amounts
Yep.
in some order? Okay. So
Well, and we technically have the committee. What we'd be doing is expanding the school committee subcommittee, adding other members, right? Yeah.
Because none of us are, like, what do we know? Or maybe you guys do, but I don't. Like, what do I know about anything? That's how I feel. Like, I don't know.
So
I agree, Nancy. I don't think any of us are holding ourselves up to be experts in this area.
Okay.
So it seems to me that we need to tackle the committee, whatever that's going to look like first, and then decide if we're moving on to amounts or process, or maybe we divide and conquer. But it seems like if we start talking about the process and amounts, we're putting the cart before the horse. Because
So who are you suggesting maybe, or do you want to take, the time between this meeting and our next meeting to reach out to people that we think might be a valuable asset to this
do
committee?
you have guidance
I'm
on
not
that,
su-
Caroline?
I'm not sure we should do that as individuals. I think, well, maybe we would do that, but I think first we would need to, as our little committee of 3, excuse me, decide on, what categories of groups or, that we would like to try to solicit a member from. I know that, we don't want a committee that's too large. So I think we're really just talking about, maybe what we want is just one person representing each school if we're going to have it be all the schools, or perhaps not, because, the focus will be on Bland James, which is this magnificent new structure. But certainly I would, for example, if he's able to do this, recommend that Sam Cedarbaum, who's the principal of, who will be the principal of Bland James, be involved, because he would have a better understanding of kind of the significance of each space. And, he's the one who is literally kind of all of the staff, all of the parents, et cetera, in some ways interact with him. But I don't know if we did that for Bland James, if we would also want to look at asking the principals of the other 3 schools to have some kind of role on, or maybe we could just do, middle high school would be one person, middle school, high school might be one person, because we've already had the campaign for Olive Branch High School, and we've had that one space in the middle school that has been named after someone. So, I think it.
For
Go
those
ahead.
schools, we would be looking, I think, if I'm hearing it right, to either confirm that these are the prices we still want to keep or change it. So we're kind of rebranding everything, right?
Right, well, it's really only Olive Range that we have designated prices. I mean, we came up with a price for the middle school auditorium, and then unfortunately,
Well,
after we had committed to it, the individual who was promoting it said that they couldn't afford it. And, we ended up allowing a very significant discount, which we were not happy about. But at that point, the process had already been publicized, et cetera. So
I
it was
think your idea of taking the part out about contribution, professional contribution, or whatever, community contribution,
right.
will take away that ability to negotiate.
I agree. That's a good point. Yep.
So
I like the way you put it.
So I think that'll be going forward. It's this or it's this. There's been times that people have come in front of us, and since I've been on the school committee, to name an area or whatnot that's not on this little list, and I have no idea if that's fair or not, but I was told there's another list with more things on it. So that's why I'm wondering if we just kind of want to use this as a guide, but start over and just create.
There's a Google Doc, a spreadsheet out there that we could get. It's been in front of us before, I think when we were doing the performing arts, when we were doing Dalrymple, and it's all the spaces that have been named, how much they were paid for, et cetera. So they're not all on this list. No, you're right. But this was something that was like something that Lynn would keep, that every time there was a donation, who made it, how much was it, that kind of thing.
So
yeah, I think you're right.
Go ahead. Sorry, Caroline.
No, well, I was just going to say there were some small spaces that really didn't really make sense to add to a formal document. And we have named small spaces after people for a donation, but it was just a donation that we kind of tossed around as a reasonable amount and ended up agreeing to as a school committee. And again, all of this does go to the full school committee. I mean, both the individual for which something's named and the amount has to be accepted by the full school committee. But I think that we take a lot of the burden off whatever the larger committee that create will have, if we try to make sure that we do make this a sort of firm document. And there may be small spaces. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I mentioned at the last school planning committee meeting, and I'm waiting for some information, is that I'd had a request, I think you folks are aware of it, from a mom who wanted to name a space, actually an outdoor space at Parkview, in honor of her child who is deceased. Obviously, Parkview is being demolished. So I did speak with her at length, and she said she would be very happy to have a space outside at Blanche James and would be happy to make a donation. I think outside spaces in honor of individuals could be another option for people. And I think that would be a situation where there could be a lot of flexibility. It would really just be something that maybe the naming subcommittee wouldn't necessarily even be directly involved. It could be just the school committee, or it could be both. But I think that outdoor spaces, you can kind of wing it more, because each one is different from the other. It's hard to make them all comparable. Somebody might want to name a playground. That would be a larger amount, one would think, logically, than, say, a brick in a pathway or something like that. That's one of the things that was talked about just briefly at the school planning committee meeting. But, I think the library has bricks where people made donations in honor of, and it's lovely. And that's something that would be a modest amount of money, but would give a lot of people opportunities to, well, we even talked about that in terms of the auditorium before, having the individual seats having plaques, but we never really went anywhere with that. But that's the kind of thing where you offer an opportunity to many individuals, but it would be a modest donation that would be requested. And so that broadens the participation. Anyway, just some thoughts, but the outdoor spaces are sort of, we can talk more about that, but I think that is the area where we'll have a lot more flexibility.
Right.
The other thing I want to bring up is that, so, I mean, we could put something together that said, you know, you can name anything that you want, and then you bring it to us and we'll give you the amount that we're looking for that space? Or do we have the people that, like you just said, the outside space, she wants to do a tree or a garden or something? You know, what do we say? You're taking up this much space, so it's, $2,000, whatever it is. And do we do it like that, or do we actually have people on our committee that will go out and not sell, but, put it out there that these things are available?
Well, I suspect we'll be sending out some sort of flyer or some sort of informational, could even be online, to the entire school community at some point, months from now, obviously, but many months possibly. But, and that would be at least initially promoting the opportunity to name spaces in honor of somebody. And then I do think we have to have a list of actual donation amounts for the majority of spaces, but there could still, as has happened, be small spaces that really, it doesn't make sense to really designate a specific amount. And you could still have somebody come forward and say, could I have this little office space named after my favorite teacher, and I'd like to donate $1,000 or whatever. That could probably be just something the school committee, and that's what we did, is take under advisement and approve. So I do think that any sort of official logical space, maybe the smallest would be classrooms, and the largest, of course, auditoriums or gyms or whatever. Those probably we have to have designated, hate to say it this way, but price tags attached.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we should, because, the goal is the donations will go towards the upkeep, maintenance, whatever, of the spaces of, in each individual school. So, at the time that RO was built, it would, that might have been a great thing to have naming things, because that's a beautiful school. And I don't think anything's named over there. So, it would have been, I don't know. I just think it would be a great way for the whole community to participate. We had a man come in to one of our meetings once, and he wanted to donate something at the current Parkview. So that was when we were getting underway with Blanche Ames. So he was going to come back, and I think it was for his dad or something. So, we need to reach out to people that are interested in donating and choosing what they want to donate to.
You're right, Nancy, that we didn't have a comparable campaign for RO. But the thing is, at Oliver Ames High School, what happened is the initial campaign was put together because there was a shortfall. Remember, the prices had gone way up. And then as it turned out.
And then the middle school didn't, never mind, I won't get into that. Go ahead. I don't want to.
Okay. I know. You're forever attached to the middle school.
We need a new kitchen at the middle school.
but the other thing that happened, and I think I had mentioned this maybe to one of you, is that I found out from the people that I spoke with who were on the previous steering, and not the steering committee, the cabinet members. I did mix them up, and I apologize for that. But one of the things they did talk about is well, actually, I lost my train of thought there for a second. But I know that what happened with Oliver Ames is that two things happened. they were going to have a big sort of splashy sort of publicity campaign. But then two things happened. Number one, recession, really serious recession. So the idea was that to ask people to donate at a time like that would be unseemly.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, it turned out that they didn't need as much money as they had anticipated based on the expected shortfall. It turned out not to be as bad as expected. So there was less sort of anxiety about having enough money to, say, have desks in every classroom, which was that was a lot of the issue, was the the furnishings for the classrooms, but it turned out not to be as bad as had been projected. So those two things happened. So that campaign never really had a big sort of splashy public.
Right.
And as I said, part of it, my understanding was that West Paul himself felt that to do that during a time when, economically, a lot of people were struggling, would be, not the best look for the district. And I think that was probably a very wise decision. But
Sure.
and actually, right now we're facing some pretty tough economic times as a
Absolutely.
country. So, I don't see us moving quickly on this, in part because we kind of need to give the economy time to recover and, inflation to diminish a bit and things like that. So, but anyway, I do think that the reason the middle school and RO and so on didn't have a campaign is because there wasn't that specific issue of a shortfall in funding, which turned out not, as I said, not to be that bad for the high school.
So I am wondering if we've tossed out a lot of ideas about all three of these kind of, I'm calling them buckets. I don't know, we can call them whatever, topics. So I'm wondering if our next thing we should do is at our next meeting, I think Nancy started to say this, kind of talk about just the committee piece, just that one piece, and who we want on it, unless we want to do that now, who we want on it, how we're going to go about selecting, that selection or applying process. I don't know. I think, Caroline, you had mentioned there was an application process in the past. I don't know. Again, I wasn't part of it. But what does that look like? What does it look like demographic wise? What does it look like process wise? And I think that's kind of where we need to start, unless somebody thinks something different.
I don't think there was actually necessarily an application process. I can check on that. I think for the cabinet members, which were the key people, it was just the logic of having, the principal, 2 members of the school committee. I know at least 3 of the others were very involved parent volunteers for the high school. So I think it was probably, pardon me?
I know that some of these names, did these people have students at OA? Is that where they?
Yes, they had students at OA, but they were also very active parents. So I think that there was just a sort of, it might even have been the school committee itself. I don't really recall. I mean, I know that we selected 2 school committee members to be on, which were Jane Pike Benton and Becky Turley, and West Paul obviously being the principal, but the others, I think Leslie Fitzgerald was, I know she was very involved in school council and might have been, and she was co-chair actually of that smaller group, that cabinet group.
Yep.
And I think obviously these were all high school people. We will be extending that. Makes sense. But I think we need to look for categories of individuals. Yeah. And as you said earlier, it's a mistake to go much beyond about, well, the ideal group size for supposedly effective decision-making is somewhere between 7 and 9 individuals. And I think at least there's a lot of research that supports that. So I think that what we don't want is a huge committee just so that we can say we included one in every group. This may be a little bit controversial to say, but I always think that when we say, well, we're going to have one parent, when we know we have 7,000 or 8,000 parents, in the school district that probably have 7,000 or 8,000 different ideas about everything. It's a kind of a token, and it makes sense, but it seems like maybe we need to narrow the criteria, not just say a parent from the school or a teacher, that maybe somebody that has some additional qualifications in addition to that, so that it's not just, we had 50 parent applications and we're going to do a lottery or something like that, that at least we have some criteria that even say a parent volunteer or a faculty volunteer would meet, that would in some way clearly contribute to the process. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yep,
Right.
yep, that's good.
And I do agree. I think 7 to 9 is probably a good number. It just,
And there's already 3 of us. No, maybe in addition, I don't know. We'd have to figure that out. I guess we could go with the 9.
right. So that might,
So do we need to talk about when our next meeting is going to be? We haven't
sure.
made a list of meetings yet, right?
No, we've
No.
not.
Okay,
So we agree our next meeting topic will be about issues around the committee. Ironing out, starting to think through that. And that
And recruiting some additional members, right?
right.
The recruitment process, the criteria, et cetera. Yep.
okay. So sure. When is good for you guys?
Well, why don't you tell us what's good for you?
June
I can make my schedule work.
23rd.
What day?
I'm kidding. I said June 23rd.
Oh,
No, I think this 4 o'clock on a Wednesday is not a bad idea, because
Yeah.
Even when we have school planning, that's not
Yeah.
till 5:30. And
is that on a
we don't have-
Wednesday? Is that
It is on a Wednesday. It's once a month on a Wednesday. And we
Oh,
wouldn't
okay.
have to, I actually have somewhere here in my stack of things, the next meetings for school planning. Let me just, 1 second, I'll look.
Okay.
Okay, I do. So the next 3 school planning meetings are October 19th, November 16th, and December 21st. So we can just, if we want, we can just avoid those dates, so that if we did have a longer meeting, we wouldn't have to run into that.
So those are
And-
the 3rd Wednesday of every month.
Right. That's exactly right.
What if,
But otherwise, I think this Wednesday, I mean, as
What if
long
we
as
did the
this is good
second
for you,
Wednesday?
Michelle.
what if we did the 2nd Wednesday? So that would be like, if we wanted to just set up the next couple. like
That's a
you
good
said.
idea. No, that's a good
Could do
idea.
October 12th, November 9th, December 14th. Or is
When
that,
is-
October
Okay.
12th. Yeah. What's the next one?
November 9th.
November 9th. Wait a minute. Yep, that works. November 9th. Okay,
And December 14th.
does that work?
okay.
2
Yeah.
months?
I think
And
so. I
that's-
still have my old fashioned paper calendar in the other room, so I'll have to check, but I
Okay,
think,
so
Do you want to
that's-
get it?
pardon me?
Do you want to go get it or do you want to?
I'll go take a quick look at those 3 dates. 1 second.
Okay.
And that would be 4 o'clock, right, Zoom?
Yeah, that
Okay,
works for me if that works for you guys.
I can make it work. Did I put? Let me just see something. No. Let's see.
They look fine, those dates.
Okay, all right.
All right. Excellent. We have a plan.
We have a plan.
A roadmap of where we want to go,
Okay,
the topics that we want to tackle, and the next 3 meetings.
excellent.
That's progress. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right, excellent. So,
We need to make a motion to adjourn.
Just a quick question, Michelle. Do you want us to see if we do have any way of trying to begin some research on how pricing is done elsewhere?
Sure.
Maybe when you talk to, you
Leisha.
have your next meeting with Leisha, you could even ask if there was a way she could put out that question to her
Okay.
superintendent group. I'm just thinking if we could start to get some information, that would be helpful. We kind of know where we stand a little bit.
Okay. And we can also, between now and the 12th, start looking at, maybe there's some research or suggestions about what categories of people to include in this type of
Right,
committee.
right. That makes sense. Yep.
Okay. And I will type up the minutes and get them to Lynn.
Thank you, Nancy. You are wonderful.
Well,
Great. Anything else before we adjourn?
not writing a big story here.
Okay.
Okay, I make a motion to adjourn.
O'Neill second.
Roll call vote.
O'Neill, yes.
Grant, yes.
DeLuca, yes. All right.
Bye, guys.
So
Thank
I'll
you.
see you guys soon. Okay, take care.
Yeah, next,
Bye.
take care.
Bye-bye.